This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories. And I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids. Honestly, this is probably one of, if not the most, iconic lines to come out of the Scooby-Doo franchise. But this just led me to the question, are they serious about this? Would they actually have got away with it? Or were they going to be going to jail no matter what they did? And that's what inspired this video. I honestly thought it'd be a lot of fun to look at this. And as I said, I thought it was actually a really fun idea. As you know, I had a poll up a few weeks ago that talked about this, and I'll be speaking of that in just a moment. But let's first take a look at just how I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be looking at this and putting them in one of three categories where they would definitely get away with it, they definitely wouldn't, and then I have a more conditional one where I would say they would kind of, because there's either ones where they have to do it by doing a crime a very specific way, or certain factors have to go in their favor for it to happen their way, but there are some of those where I just think that it's not as straightforward. But you'll start to see patterns emerge, and I'll mention those patterns once I start having a few examples of them. But let's go straight into this first talking about the poll. And with this was just honestly a really fun poll to post to see what people would think. And if we take a look at it, somehow we got exactly the amount of votes as episodes for the show. And most people think that all of the Scooby-Doo villains would have got away with it. Well, the next amount would have thought that either most or none of them, followed by about half of them. And no one really thought that only some of them, meaning only a few of them, would have got away with it. And I feel like, I can't be on either of the extremes. So the people who voted on either half or most are probably the ones who have the most best chance to do it, because we could already confirm it's going to be none of them, because one of the villains actually did get away with it. And some of these, there's guaranteed chances that some of them were not getting away with it. And there was one that the cops were already on that specific person, so it looks like most of the people who voted on this would have been wrong. And there's like three people, about, I'm pretty sure that's how the voting works with these numbers, but I didn't do the math and don't really feel like doing it. But it's be like 3 or 4 people who actually have a chance of being right now. But let's go and take a look at it. We begin with the first episode and the Black Knight, and this has Mr. Wickles, who kidnaps Professor Hyde, so no one will notice that he's performing an art forging operation where he's stealing really paintings and replaces them with forged pictures. And taking a look at this, I do not think he's getting away with this based on what he did. He hid Professor Hyde in the middle of plain sight, and people would have eventually found him there. And this would have been through one of two ways. The first is when the museum was open, people would have noticed that there was actual eyes in this and realized someone was there. And even if no one actually noticed him, he's probably not being fed or having really a chance to sleep, so he would eventually pass out or even die. And that would cause people to notice that he's there, and once the police show up, they'll begin to investigate. And even if they don't discover the art smuggling operation, they will be able to at least figure out enough to put Wickles away for a long time. And even if they didn't, people are going to notice that these aren't the real paintings, because there's no way Hyde is the only person on Earth that will be able to tell what the real painting is and what a fake one is. So yeah, there's just really no way that Wickles is getting away with this at all. Our next episode takes a look at the ghost of Captain Cutler, And in this one, Captain Cutler fakes his own death and begins to haunt ships and makes them disappear so he can steal them and resell them. And this one is our first kind of, and this is all dependent on how he acts and how long he acts, and based on a few other factors. Because if we take a look at it, Cutler and his wife really do have to be smart about this, and if they end their operations soon, they should be able to get away with it, with one exception of the fact that he needs to find a way to return from the dead or disguise himself as a new type of person because he is officially labeled as dead. So they have to find a way to explain his return, and also the fact that there was a ghost apparently of him haunting ships. So that's going to make things a little more complicated. But there's also the fact that if they continue this for too long, they're eventually going to come across a trap set by the police, and they will be caught and arrested. So it all really depends, as I said, on how smart they are. So I feel like if they are at least smart enough, they can get away with it, but it all depends on how smart they are and how risky they decide to be by pushing it for longer and longer. But as I said, they could get away with it, but I can't say with 100% certainty that they would. Now, looking at the next one, we have the character of the Phantom, and this is a plan by Bluestone the Great to use his magic tricks so he could scare people away from the Vasquez castle so he could steal their treasure. And I think that he would totally get away with this. He had some very impressive effects, and being able to use his magic skills, I think that he'd be able to do it long enough to get the treasure and make enough money so we can get away with this. And yeah, honestly, we have our first one who got away with it, and I totally think it is possible, and you're going to start seeing a pattern with these. I'll mention it more once you start to notice it and I've revealed more, but there's definitely a pattern that's going to start coming across here for crimes that will get away with it and crimes that will not. Now we have up next the minor 49er, and we have Hank, who is trying to scare everyone away from a small town so he can buy up all the land and be able to get all the oil that he found. And yeah, I totally think he'd get away with this because he was pretty close to succeeding. The town was basically abandoned by the point that he was there, and he only had one person left to go against. So yeah, I think that he's totally going to get away with it, and that he's not going to really suffer any problems after, since once he buys up the land, he can act like he found the oil after and be able to make a bunch of money off of that. Up next, we have the Indian Witch Doctor, and just to be clear, this is different than the Witch Doctor that will appear later. And I nearly accidentally skipped over this because I thought that I had this in the wrong spot when I was looking through the stuff. But for this one, we have Buckmasters, who's stealing all the dogs from a dog show so he could be able to have his dog win once his dog mysteriously returns to him. And for this one specifically, I don't say he would get away with it because he's committing this crime pretty fast and it doesn't give people really a time to notice that he's done it, as long as he does it for this one specific dog show. And as I said, I'm only looking at crimes they're committing during the episode and not either future crimes they may commit or crimes they've already committed. So for this one, yes, but if he keeps it up, I do want to mention that they're going to figure it out and he will be arrested for it. But for this one time, he will get away with it as long as he really doesn't do it again, because then he will be caught for doing it this time, since they would have figured out he did it in that future scenario. But since we can't really say that would happen, I'm just going to say yes and not give him a kind of. Up next, we have the ghost of Elias Kingston, and for this one, we have Stuart Weatherby, who is haunting his family so they can give their fortune over to him. And this one is definitely a more complicated one because it is another kind of, because if we look at it, even if he succeeds, it's going to be pretty complicated for him since he has to actually explain how he got all this money now. So he would either have to flee the country with his money or have to find a way to hide it or launder it. And yeah, it makes things more complicated. If he flees, it definitely puts suspicion on him, or he could fake his own death. But there's just so many things that cause problems here. Even if he did get away with stealing the money, it just makes things a lot more complicated for him. Plus, even if he could find a way to get it into his accounts, the IRS might be asking questions. And with all these problems popping up, I feel like it is just definitely a lot more hard to say if he would or would not, which is why this gets a kind of. Up next, we have the Ape Man, and this one is a pretty simple one where we have Carl the Stuntman who is sabotaging a movie production, basically just as revenge because he wanted to be cast as the lead. And with this, he totally would have got away with it. He had a way to explain that he wasn't the Ape Man and had himself be tied up and everything, and it even looked like everyone was about to quit before Scooby and the gang intervened, so he totally would have got away with this. As long as he was smart and didn't do this on every movie production. But for this, we're only taking a look at the individual crimes that they're committing and not any other ones that they may have committed or will be committing. So that makes things just a lot easier because I don't have to predict any what if scenarios. Up next, we have Charlie the Robot. And with this, we have Sarah Jenkins, who was sabotaging Charlie because she didn't want him to run the theme park that her and her brother owned, and her brother wanted him to. And yeah, she totally would have got away with this because she got away with it in the show. She was exposed for what she did, and everyone was understanding, and they decided not to use Charlie to run the theme park. So yeah, she totally gets away with this because she got away with the crime in the show, and it really wasn't a crime because she was just preventing her brother from doing something stupid, and he decided not to press any charges against her. The next one we have is Pietro the Puppet Master, and he's running a counterfeiting scheme from his theater, and that is being defended by ghosts and puppets to scare people away. And there's absolutely no way he's getting away with this. The police were already kind of onto him. They knew about a counterfeiting scheme and tried to figure out where the money came from. And considering that he lost a case of his counterfeit money while driving and Shaggy and Scooby were able to find it, there is absolutely no way that he's going to win with this long term, and the cops will eventually catch on to him, and they won't be able to be just scared away by these puppets and ghosts. So he is totally going away and going to jail for a pretty long time since he would have assaulted officers, and it's not looking good for him. Up next, we have the Ghost Clown, and this is the plan of Harry the Hypnotist, who wants to sabotage the circus that got him sent to prison for committing crimes before by forcing everyone to quit by making the circus extremely dangerous. And yeah, honestly, he was just about to get away with it before Scooby and the gang showed up, and they're the only reason that it failed. And he would have been able to get away with it long before any police showed up and be able to investigate. So yeah, he's totally gonna get away with this, and it's gonna be pretty easy for him to do this. Up next, we have just a bunch of various monsters that were in the Franken Castle. It was just too many to count for how many this person did, but Big Bob Oakley was haunting the Franken Castle so he could try and find the hidden treasure there. And yeah, I would totally have got away with this crime since he would have eventually been able to find where the jewels were and nearly got away with it in the show, but was captured by Scooby and the gang. But he was eventually going to be caught because he already was wanted by the police. But as I said, we're not going to be looking at other crimes they committed, so with this crime, he would totally be able to get away with it as long as he sells it and doesn't get caught with possession of it when he is captured eventually for his other crimes. But since there's no real way to tell that, I would just say he would get away with this one specifically, and he's eventually never going to be caught for other crimes, but that's just something I wanted to mention because I totally see that happening. Up next, we have the Mommy of Anaka, and this is all done by an actor Najib, who wants to steal an ancient coin that is used to get a valuable artifact. And yeah, he would totally would have gotten away with this because the only reason he did it is because for some reason Shaggy accidentally stole the coin that he needed, and I don't really get how you could accidentally take a coin without knowing it, and especially if it's valuable in a museum. That one doesn't really make too much sense, but it's a kid's show, the plot doesn't need to make so much sense. So yeah, Najib would totally have got away with it, and would have been able to flee the country if he was caught and had to take anyone out, but it was pretty simple. So let's move on to the next one. And this one is The Witch and the Zombie. And for this one, I'm going off of a small assumption, but I still think that it does apply. And for this, we have Zeke and Zeb Perkins, who are scaring people away from a swamp where they crashed an armored car years ago and now want to recover it. And for this, I'm assuming that they waited for the statute of limitations to expire on this crime and are now going to retrieve the money. So, based off of that, I think that they should totally be able to get away with this. And once they find the truck, they should be able to get the money. So, I think that this will be pretty simple. They could just say, they found money or inherited it or something. And they can find a simple enough explanation for how they got it. Well, since they were caught, they didn't get away with it, but I'm just assuming that they waited for it to no longer be considered a crime that they could be prosecuted for until they could have got it. So if I'm wrong, this could have been moved to a kind of or a no, but I think that the only reason they did wait this long was because of that reason. Up next, we have Redbeards Ghost, and for this, we have CL Magnus, who is robbing his own ships to make a profit so he could save his shipping company. And this one's totally a kind of because it's all dependent on one thing. If the IRS decides to investigate him to see how he got the money to save his company, because if they do, then he's in trouble. But if they don't, then he'll be fine. But it also depends on how he is as a manager, because it could have just been him and his decisions that got the company to this bad place, or it could have just been some kind of accident or something that caused this. So it all depends, but there's just too many complications around this scenario to figure it out. So I have to say, kind of. Up next, we have the Space Kook, and this one is another pretty simple one. We have Henry, who wants to scare away everyone so he can buy him up their land, since he knows that the Air Force is going to be reopening the airship, and although they don't specifically say it, it sounds like he wants to do it so he can sell this land to the Air Force. And yeah, I think he's going to get away with this. Once again, he was pretty close to getting away with this crime before Scooby and the gang showed up. And if you can start to see, the ones I'm totally saying would get away are mainly people who are doing it to commit a smaller crime, but you'll start to see the reason I'm going to say no soon because I haven't really got too many of those situations. But we've had a bunch of yeses and kind of, so it seems like those people who are voting closer to most of, or not all, might be the ones who are correct, but we'll see if that stays with the next ones that we look at. Up next, we have a personal favorite of mine, the Phantom Shadow, or more accurately, Phantom Shadows. And for this, we have Cosgood Creeps and his partner, Mr. Crawls, are trying to scare away all the heirs to Colonel Beauregard Sanders' fortune so they could get it for themselves. And here, I am going to say yes, but there is a but on this because they had to scare away all the heirs, and the only heir left was Scooby. So, assuming they didn't actually kill the people, which are just saying it was dummies, but who knows, maybe they just said that to cover up the fact that they killed the people, since, that didn't make too much sense, and it was just retconned in just a random line that didn't really make too much sense. But if we just look past that and just say they did scare them away, or they killed them and just hid the bodies pretty well after, they ultimately failed because, as we know in the episode, it turned out that the $1 billion they were committing these crimes for was all in Confederate money. So, although they did succeed in their crime, they got absolutely no payoff, and it is just pretty funny to think that they got arrested for completely worthless money to them. Although I do think that they maybe could have sold this to collectors for, maybe even a small price, like a penny or like 10 cents. And I could have still got a few thousand to maybe $100,000 off of this. And now looking at the Snow Ghost, we have Mr. Greenway and Mr. Leech, who are using the Legends of the Snow Ghost, who they've heard from another one of the people at the hotel, to be able to keep people away from their diamond smuggling operation. And yeah, with this, they're not going to be getting away with this because I feel like the police are eventually going to catch on to their operation. Something a bit like this, and that's this big, will eventually have a slip up, or someone who wants to go to the police, or someone that is caught and decides to flip on their bosses. It basically always happens, and since the Snow Ghost isn't really explaining anything about this operation, unlike Cutler, who was able to use it to hide everything he was doing, we see them going to prison for eventually being caught by the police, and this operation is going to fall apart eventually. Up next, we have the Ghost of Mr. Hyde, and this has Dr. Jekyll, who is apparently the descendant of the one from the classic book, and he's a jewel robber, and he is framing his maid Helga for being the Ghost of Hyde. So I think that he is totally going to get away with this since he set up everything to frame her, and as long as he is basically smart and doesn't commit any of the more crimes after Helga is arrested and framed for his crimes, he should be totally fine with this. Up next, we have the Ghost of Zen 2. Don't know if I said that correctly, but it is committed by A. Fong, who is using this ghost to keep away people from his smuggling operation. And here I'm going to start noticing the pattern that if criminals are just using it to keep people away from their operation, but it's still a criminal operation that is going to be taking place over time, they're totally going to be caught because I would say once again here that this is just more of a distraction, and the police are eventually going to catch on to it, especially since one of the masks that had all the information was accidentally delivered to the wrong place, so they are totally not going to get away with it, and with the fact that they had some pretty big slip ups like that, they'll be eventually caught and sent to prison. And for this next one, we have the Caveman, and for this, we have Professor Wayne, who wants to take out Professor Inkstrom, who has created a marine life communicator that he wants to have so we can make all the money off of it. And this one is kind of based on the fact that he didn't kill Professor Ingstrom, and if he does kill him, then he should totally be able to get away with this and blame it all on the caveman, who eventually would escape, and he could just dressed up as him a few times, causing destruction, and eventually just have him disappear. So yeah, I think that he would be able to get away with it only if he does commit this murder, but if he decides to keep him prisoner, he's eventually going to be found or find a way to escape, or something will happen and he'll be exposed. We don't know if he had the plans to kill him, so I have to say kind of, but if he was planning to kill him, then yeah, he would have got away with it. Up next, we have probably the most famous villain of them, being the Creeper. And this one has Mr. Carswell, who was robbing his own bank, and then dressing up later on at night as the Ghost the Creeper, saying that he snuck into the bank and stole the money. But a guard has also managed to catch him on camera, and Carswell is trying to take him out so the evidence doesn't get taken. And there's no way he's getting away with this. The guard was able to catch him once, and even if this guard is killed, he still would have been caught eventually because other people would have noticed and someone would have figured it out. He wasn't doing the best job, so he is totally going to go to prison sooner or later, and they would have figured him out eventually, even if it wasn't from that specific guard. Up next, we have the Headless Spectre and the Phony Phantom, and this one is a completely unique one because we have another one who actually did get away with it, but also wasn't committing any crimes because we have another one named Pedro Stillwell who dressed up as the Headless Spectre so he could scare people off his land so he could find his family inheritance in there. And we have another person being his neighbor, Essa Shanks, who is also dressing up as a ghost to scare people away to get the money, but he also moved stuff around and found the location of where the money was. And while I think it could be a little more complicated with this, the only criminal here is Shanks, and I don't think he would have got away with it because the only reason he was close to getting away with it is because Stonewall thought that it was Scooby and the gang who were the ones making the noises, and he was trying to scare them off, but he would eventually been able to figure out it was actually Shanks and either scared him away or caught him or got him arrested for trespassing. And even if he didn't find his treasure, it didn't really matter because it's all about Shanks getting it, and I don't think that he is getting it, and he would be sent to prison for his crimes, trespassing, and everything else. But again, Stillwell is not being considered a criminal for this, and only Shanks is, so let's move on to the next one because we are almost done with these. Up next, we have the Witch Doctor, and this is John Sims, who is a pearl poacher who was using the Witch Doctor scheme to keep people away from his operation. And this is one where I could say with 100% certainty it's no kind of theory or anything. Well, this one and Sarah Jenkins with Charlie the Robot, that he would not get away with it. While the other one was get away with it, but there's no way he would get away with this because the police were already onto his scheme, and there's already an undercover cop that was on the job to catch him and arrest him for this crime. So yeah, there's no way he would have done this, and as I said before, if they're using a ghost just to cover up a larger criminal operation, they're going to be caught, but if they're using a ghost just to cover up a smaller time criminal operation or a single crime, then they'll have a way better chance at getting away with it. Up next, we have our second to last one, which is the werewolf. And this is just used by a gang of sheep rustlers to scare people away from their sheep smuggling operation. And yeah, they're totally gonna be caught for this. This werewolf is going around a sheepville where it's pretty obvious what's going on. The police will very easily be able to figure this out. And if worse comes to worse, they'll just load some silver bullets into their guns and kill the werewolf. So there's no real way for them to get away with this, and they will be pretty easily caught. In fact, the werewolf just makes things worse for them since it's drawing attention to the location, when there really wasn't any reason to draw attention to it. So, yeah, honestly, there was no way they're getting away with this. And they set themselves up for failure by even putting some kind of legend of a monster around it, since it's just going to cause more attention to come to the place where their criminal operation is taking place. And it's pretty obvious what could be happening there, since there's not really much else they could do there. Now, finally, looking at our last villain, we have the Wax Phantom, and Roger Stevens, who is the head of this TV station, has been embezzling a lot of money and is going to flee to South America using the Wax Phantom to frame Mr. Grisby, who swore to bring the Wax Phantom to life as revenge for him being fired. And yeah, honestly, he is totally going to get away with this. He was basically about to before he was caught by Scooby and the gang, who more or less ran across the side accident. And the main thing is, it doesn't matter that he could be found out to have committed the crime, or they can figure out that Grisby is innocent, because once he's fled the country, as long as he doesn't go anywhere that has a treaty with the US, they can't extract him from there, so he totally gets away with it. And since he was willing to leave the country and not come back, he is pretty easily going to get away with this and live off the money he stole for the rest of his life. And taking a look at the numbers we have, we see that 13 of them would have got away with it. And if we multiply that by 4, we get that 52% of them would have totally got away with it. And that means people who guessed about half would be right. But let's take into account some other things. We now have to figure out how many would have got it on conditional circumstances. So for that, we look through them and we have 4 conditional ones, which would mean 16% are conditional. And I think to be fair on that, we can give them just half of that, say, which could go towards got away with it, and half could go to didn't get away with it. But if we were to take the straight numbers, it would be 52% would have got away with it, 60% could have got away with it, and 32% would not have got away with it. So those would be the straight up numbers. But I think just to make things easier and go towards the simple would or would not have, we'll just add 8% to each side, meaning that 60% would have and 40% would not have. And this would still make the about half be true, since 60% is still closer to 50 than it is to 75, which is what I would consider most of being. And yeah, so the only people who voted that about half of them would have got away with it would be right. And the people who said most of them were still pretty close. And yeah, honestly, I think that it is pretty interesting. Again, this is all my opinion for these crimes. And the 2 we can say with 100% certainty is the ones with the witch doctor and Charlie the robot, since no matter what, those would have ended the same way, since everything with Charlie ended up with the person getting away with it, and everything with the witch doctor, the police were already on the guy, so he was already going to jail eventually. And yeah, honestly, I want to know what you think. Please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next episode of Legends and Theories. Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, check out the video on screen, and may the Force be with you.